Welcome back, everybody. Good afternoon. It's nice to see you again. We said after the second time, the whole crowd was great. After the third session, even more amazing to have a full room and have more people online.
Feel better
too. So welcome. There should be enough seating for everybody, plenty of food, so please enjoy yourselves. And thank you, Rabbi Lyon, for leading this entire series. It's been really wonderful. It's been such great feedback, and people really enjoyed more today as well. Looking ahead this weekend, Dr. Gadi Taub from Israel will be with us from Jerusalem. He's a professor at Hebrew University and will be our guest for the entire weekend, Friday night and Saturday morning Torah study as well. And Sunday morning, he'll be speaking to religious school parents and others too about
all right, I'm off.
current conflict in Israel.
All right, love you, bye.
Please join us for that this weekend. Also, Liana Rothstein is our guest guide, who we've all enjoyed whenever we go to Israel, but she'll be coming to see us in person. So if you've never had the chance to learn with her, either online or in person, please join us on the 20th of February, 20th, Tuesday evening, right here in the at 7 p.m. We'll be online and in person as well to welcome Liana to the congregation. The following night, I also want to just highlight Leslie Contreras Schwartz, who is the former poet laureate of the city of Houston and member of our congregation. We'll be doing a poetry reading in partnership with the Library Committee and the Social Justice Committee. That's Wednesday evening on the 21st at 7 o'clock. Thank you, Rabbi Lyon.
Great.
Thank you,
David.
Everybody.
Thank you all for being here and those who are on Zoom. It's true to have three parts of the series, and you're still here. It's a compliment to you and just a little bit to me. I'm glad that the market. And you can't discount the power of food to attract people to the table. But I'm very glad that we're here together today, and in particular, I'm in no rush today either. So we have another wonderful chapter, The Way of Humanity, to discover. And the reason I chose this particular one to end with is because the first one was the particular way. So we had to identify, how do we find our particular way to God? How do we appreciate the strengths that we have, the qualities that we've been given? And to manage to identify that our way is acceptable and kosher and meaningful also. Last time we did not to be preoccupied with ourselves, which was a marvelous way to get out of our own way and to appreciate that all the strengths and qualities we have, which are meaningful, can also be part of a larger community that we build together. Today's title comes from chapter 6, Here Where One Stands. And I think what some of you have said to me on Shabbat and since we began studying together is that this series of lectures, which Buber did, just seems so accessible. And they speak to us in such a mindful and simply human way. And frankly, in the noise of the world around us, let alone what's going on in the world today, we could go back to any time in our life to get out from behind the noise and to understand that where we live and where we are is the only place we need to be to find fulfillment in our life is a very validating and affirming statement. A long time ago, and then we'll jump right in, especially in the 1960s and 70s, there was a lot of spiritual seeking going on. And there's an old story that has been floating around the Jewish community that tells a story about a Jewish mother who really longed for her son, who was on a spiritual quest, to come home, finally. So she went to Tibet, she went up the mountain, and she learned that she could only see the guru on a certain day, at a certain time. And when she saw the guru, she could only speak 3 words. She prepared herself really very carefully to be sure she did it just right and wouldn't lose this opportunity. She climbed the mountain, all the stairs. She finally had permission at the right time to sit before the guru and utter her 3 words. And the moment came. And she said to the guru, "Sheldon, come home." It's an old story, and it always gets a good laugh because the truth is sometimes we just want to wonder and ask, are we where we need to be? Or is there some mountaintop or seashore or someplace distant from us where we should be to accomplish what we think we need to do? And what Martin Buber helps us to understand is that where we are is where we need to be. And so wherever you live, as someone once said, grow where you are planted. And it's a mindful way of helping us to discover what is already present in front of us. This chapter begins is with a very famous story. I couldn't type out, and I didn't want to just copy the entire long story on page 33. It's just the conclusion that's written on the paper in front of you. But I have to read the story to you because you have to feel it. You have to get the whole context of it. So it goes like this, and I apologize, I won't read that much and for so long after we finish this. Rabbi Bunam used to tell the story of Isaac, the son of Yechel, to the youths who came to him for the first time. Isaac had lived in Krakow in severe poverty for many years, but his faith in God had remained unshaken. One night he had a dream in which he was ordered to search for a treasure that was buried under the bridge leading to the king's castle in Prague. After dreaming the same dream for the third time, which is a pretty good count, after the third time you can rely on it, Isaac started on a journey to Prague. But the sentries guarding the bridge by day and by night did not dare, because of them, Isaac didn't dare dig near the bridge where the dream told him he should. Nevertheless, he returned to the bridge every morning and walked around it until evening. Finally, the captain of the guard, who had noticed his behavior, asked him in a friendly tone if he was looking for something or perhaps waiting for something. Isaac told him about the dream that had led him here from a distant land. The captain of the guard laughed at Isaac. "You poor fool, with holes in your shoes, you have walked all this way just because of a dream. Who believes in dreams? I myself would have been on a long quest if I believed in dreams too. Once, the guard said to him, I was told in a dream to wander to Krakow and to find in the house of a Jew named Isaac. If I had dug under his heart, I would find a treasure. Isaac, son of Yechel, indeed. I can only imagine myself pulling every house apart, since half the Jews in Krakow are named Isaac and the other half are named Yechel." The captain laughed again. Isaac bowed to him, returned home, dug up the treasure, and built the synagogue that is named Reb Isaac, Reb Yechel Shul to this day. So Rabbi Bunam used to add, and this is written on your paper, so you'll always have it. Remember this story and pay attention to what it tells you. There is something that you cannot afford, that you cannot find anywhere in the world, not even at the tzaddik's house. And yet, a place exists where you can find it. So first, let me ask you, as you heard the story and laughed at the conclusion, what is the simple lesson that we draw out of this simple story?
You are where you're supposed to be.
You are where you're supposed to be. And the treasure, what could the treasure be? How would you define that treasure? In the story that wants us to believe it's a box filled with coins and jewels and real treasure, but what else could the treasure be?
It's a little bit of there's no place like home.
There's no place like home.
But it's also make the best of what you have.
Right.
Make it work.
Yeah, make the best of what you have. And specifically, the treasure could be?
Your children, your child, yes.
Yeah, it's right in front of you. It's right in front of you. And very often,
Your kitties.
we think it's so much farther away. And what's right in front of us isn't worth our time or effort. And it's not as special as what we thought somebody else had somewhere else. The context of this for Buber is his longing to find meaning where he is. And he had a troubled life. I think I remember I told you that his parents were divorced and he moved around quite a bit because of circumstances in the world at the time. But we, as mostly Americans raised in America, have always been put in front of us the new and improved, the best. We've got to go farther and higher and faster to find meaning in life, because if we just sit in Houston, Texas, and watch the news or come to synagogue, it's not enough. But Buber wants us to know enough already that where we are and what we're doing in that place might be enough. But he unpacks it in this chapter to let us know how it's possible that we can validate that claim and enjoy what we have in front of us. So he goes on, and let's take a look at number 1 on your page. It's in the chapter, but I sort of underlined the book and provided for you the statement. So do you need, are you missing one? Okay. Number one says there is a certain something. Do you need a page 2?
We have,
Are there extras? Okay, right here. Okay. There's a certain something that can be found only in one unique place in the world. That something is a great treasure, namely the fulfillment of one's existence. And the place where this treasure may be found is the place where one stands. So Buber's making a very profound but simple point, that the treasure that we're seeking, even in the story and personally, is first of all not something physical. I don't want you to go home first and start looking around your house for the physical treasure. You know, I've been looking at that horrible statue and now I realize it's my treasure. What Buber says is that something, that great treasure is the fulfillment of one's existence. So what we have to begin with is your existence. The fact that you exist, the fact that you are, is the beginning of identifying your treasure. Okay? You are created in God's image. You are a part of humanity. The Psalms say that the light of God is the spirit of every human being. There is something very beautiful about each of you, and that is the beginning of your treasure. Is that acceptable?
Very.
You like that? Okay. I think it's a beautiful start, and it's what Buber wants us to begin to own, because there's more that unfolds from it, and that's where we're going to go now. So number 2, which he includes in this chapter, it says, it is here where we have been placed, exactly here and nowhere else, that the treasure may be found. Now, I put in parentheses Hebrew words. This is obviously a translation of this text, and no doubt he's thinking of the word hinei, or the Hebrew word hineni. So you know the word hineni. We hear it every year at Rosh Hashanah when God calls Abraham and God calls others, and they say hineni. What does it mean?
Here I am.
Here I am. Now, around the table, the Torah study years ago, Harvey Gordon, who is so dear to all of us, those of us who know him, he doesn't live in Houston currently, but he said, you know, hine, here I am, is really 2 parts of 2 words. Hine means here, it also means behold. And the hineni, the ni at the end, means I. So in effect, it's not just here I am, ta-da, but rather behold, I. There's something awesome to use that word to identify that my presence is here. Behold, I. It's the beginning of not only identifying for ourselves that our existence matters and the beginning of something very treasured, but that other people are also experiencing our existence, where we live, where we sit, and as Buber puts it, where we stand. So in the word hine and hineni is an important and powerful Hebrew word. If you've never said it, you should learn to say it. Let's say it together. That's the beginning. Behold, I exist and I matter. And I'm looking at a room filled with everybody who's already been bar mitzvah. But really for children and teenagers,
unnecessarily.
what a profound beginning for them. When they really question, where am I going? What is the meaning of life? To know, hineni, behold, I, my existence matters and everything from it flows. So the first bullet point, as Buber outlines it in his chapter, is to say, it is here where I can experience my natural environment. Here, the world around us. We were just talking about Houston weather. Who doesn't talk about Houston weather? We're really present in our natural environment. This is where we grow and thrive and struggle. Next, here's the context that has been ordained for me. So we are here in this place for reasons that we might not necessarily understand. It's been ordained for us. It's a matter of fate. I didn't know that I would live in Houston, Texas. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. And when I was hired by Rabbi Karp in 1990 to come and be his assistant rabbi, I remember calling home and telling my mother, I got a job. She said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Houston, Texas. And she said, how could you do that to me? said it has nothing to do with you. I really said that. I said it has nothing to do with you. Lisa and I are moving to Houston, Texas. And for those of you who are transplants who suddenly came to Houston, Texas, even if you've just been here 2 weeks, it is a matter of, as Buber says, here is the context that has been ordained for me. I wouldn't go so far as to say, especially because we're Reformed Jews, reason and rational and scientific in our thought, that we should believe that God's hand placed us here. But now that we're here, what is the meaning of how do we thrive and unpack our life in a place where we have found ourselves? If this is home, then we grow where we're planted. Next, it says, here is what I encounter day after day. So behold, here, hineni, day after day, this is what I encounter. And we have to be open and present to the things that we encounter, but we also have to extend ourselves and be present in the circles where we exist and spend our time. My own children, 3 of them don't live in Houston because Houston is too big. They said. I said, I don't live all of Houston. I live in a quadrant. And if I find myself outside the quadrant, I want to go home again and hurry up and get back. So we exist in the places that we encounter. And we have concentric circles of places and areas where we go. There was once a statistic that was published that said that most accidents happen within 5 miles of your home.
Yeah.
Like it was such a great find, a great discovery that this statistic exists. Well, few of us go beyond 5 miles of our home. So the likelihood that an accident, God forbid, is going to happen within 5 miles is really not a great revelation. It's just a reality. The next one says, here I meet my daily demands. Here I meet my daily demands. The things that nourish us, nurture us, and help us to grow are actually closer to us than we thought. So I would also say, and Buber wouldn't have known about Amazon and the internet, but when we look for the things that will nourish and sustain us, we now have the ability to go online and get something from anywhere in the world, and not just anywhere in the world, but overnight. Our sense of immediate gratification has been completely undone. And it's changed our sense of maturity, our sense of patience, what we're entitled to, and how we should enjoy it. So Buber's statement, though a little, aged at this point, given the world we live in, here I meet my daily demands, which also suggests that what we get, what we provide, what we contribute, is something that we're doing for the sake of the world we live in here. When we buy something in Yenenveld and we get it delivered the next day, we say, what a miracle. I can't believe it's on my front porch the next day. But it hasn't really made a difference to the world that we live in and that demands something from us here locally at home. And I don't mean to just shop locally, but the idea is that we have the world that we live in where we exist is a place that we need to nurture and nourish so that it's here for us to feed us, to give us the life that we're expecting. And then he says, only here is my essential task. Only here. Now we have to unpack that. I would say that here is my essential task. We have obligations and responsibilities to the place where we live and eat and drink and thrive. But what does it also mean? Only here's my essential task. What is it about the essential task? What are those essential tasks that we have to fulfill here? Yeah.
Family and community.
Okay. Family and community. So the smallest concentric circle would include that essential task only here. What else is only here that we have to accomplish essentially? Yeah.
You.
You. Okay. Right. Only here.
Only you, not us, but you.
Yeah, only here's my essential task. I can't fulfill it anywhere else. Only here, where I exist, is where I have to spend my time and invest my energy. Okay.
Interesting.
The last one is, here is the fulfillment of my existence that is available to me. Here is the fulfillment of my existence that is available to me. I can't look anywhere else to find the things that are available to me. I have to look close and around me. So Buber isn't only talking about external things. I don't want to be lost in that which is external to us, but to focus essentially on what is also internal to us. And when you think about what's internal, you think about the product of your life experience, the joys you've had, the sorrows you've had, the challenges you've had, what you've learned from them, who you are today. That is your essential you. That is the behold I. That's all I got. That's all I can be, is the product of my life experience. But it shouldn't be so disconnected from us that I can only be my very best when I leave town or when I look well beyond me. Buber really wants us to find our essential self in the place where we are. Any questions?
It seems to me this is for a mature audience because without a search, you can't find yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go beyond yourself to find out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the lessons of our lives may or may not give us the comfort to say, okay, this is where I landed and accept it. And I mean, we have to do that, but we may not like it. And I think without the search, there's no way to arrive at this point.
Well, the search, I agree with you. The search is a very important part of our lives, and no matter what age we're constantly searching and growing and thriving. I think I shared with you before that all the different people who come to visit with me in my office during all different kinds of times of their lives, it isn't just the young people who need guidance and validation. I once said to a person who was 70 years old who came to see me and she shared her concerns, and I said to her, I have some news for you. I hope you're ready to hear it. I said, it's time to grow up. And so and she agreed because there were choices and thoughts that were so immature and still bound to the relationship she had with her mother, who was long gone, that it was time to find her essential self, that the only way to do it was to grow up and handle some new responsibilities. Yeah. Other
Comment on the chat.
Susan, and then we'll go to the screen.
I'm struck by two thoughts. One is the importance of being present,
Yeah.
the importance of being aware and focused on what is immediately in front of you, and married with, and this is a trite expression, but I think it fits, an attitude of gratitude. There was a song lyric, it's not having what you want, it's wanting what you have.
Yeah.
I don't remember the song. That's all I remember of it. But it's so much more about really appreciating the gifts that you bring to others and that others bring to you.
Absolutely. And I have no doubt that Buber was channeling a lot of Jewish knowledge, Jewish texts that he had learned. In Pirkei Avot, it asks, who is truly rich? Ezehu Ashir. And the answer is the person who's happy with his portion. Chelko, chelek is his portion, whatever there is. And that's true. You have to appreciate what you've got and then make more of it. And not to wait. We're always on the way to becoming. I'm sure he was also channeling in Leviticus 19 in the Holiness Code. It says in verse 2, Kedoshim tihiyu, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. And what the rabbis meant by it was to say that we are holy, but our holiness is reflected and grows over the course of our life as we continue to seek and search and become all that we can be. We're never finished. That's the issue. We're never done. And so you may be exhausted from the search or from the essential you, but we're never really finished. On the screen, Jeff Lewis.
Rabbi, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems to me that if everybody was satisfied with where they were and found fulfillment in being in place, that we would still believe the world was flat because Columbus wouldn't have been Spain and the astronauts wouldn't have gone to the moon and the Jews that left Spain and went to Portugal and then to Amsterdam would have suffered in the Inquisition. So maybe I'm not understanding. It just seems to me that not exploring and not striving for the stars There's an inconsistency here.
So I think what you're struggling with is first Judaism believes that what we have, we don't have to accept. We're constantly transforming and improving what is to become what it ought to be. So we don't wait for God to ordain or God to pull some strings we'll know what to do. We're in our Jewish DNA to transform the world. So as I say, we've been born and bred into an American Western culture where we have to seek things and go far. All Buber wants to tell us is that that's okay. You can search, you can go, you can explore, but wherever you are is your essential you. If you're on the mountaintop, adoring the scenery and appreciating nature, be in the moment. Be yourself in that moment. You can't be anybody else but you. Woody Allen said, but if you're a schmuck, be somebody else. Be the essential you in that place. But if you're not on the mountaintop and you're at home, that is where our finest treasures may very well be. That's the, Jeffrey, not the answer, but the balance that we have to try to strike as Buber challenges us. Ellen?
I'm coming at this fearness from a time of transition.
Yes.
I'm very new to Houston. The last, 10 years have been constant moving for me. And I think what I'm kind of struck by is that these here's, and sort of in response to the last question about, well, what if you're here doesn't meet your needs? What if you need to leave? I think there's sort of a transaction between if you're not able to, meet your daily demands or you cannot encounter what you need to encounter every day, your here is wherever you end up.
Yes, thank you. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And Buber, that here, that is all about being essentially present with oneself wherever you might be. And if where you live isn't safe or good or nourishing, then you need to find a place where you should be. And no doubt Buber knew that for Jews, a Jewish community where we settled had to be a place where there was a school, hospital, resources for food and worship. In simpler times, it was simply a place where there was medical care and the community to be. But Jews don't thrive in isolation. So we're not supposed to be the guru at the top of the mountain living alone. We're supposed to be together and present wherever we find ourselves. Absolutely. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
The word hineni has a lot of meaning for me. I'm writing a memoir, it's called Hineni. And I'm looking at the two spellings of Hineni. And I'm wondering, is one behold and the other one here I am? Is one I exist and the other one is I'm here to do what is required of me?
So I wrote two Hebrew words, hine, the hey, nun, hey, is here. It's a simple word that just means here or behold. It appears in the Torah quite a bit, hine, behold. And then hineni, the Hebrew word with the little chipchuk that you see, even if you don't read Hebrew, you can see it, that's hineni, which is it's a suffix on the end of the word hine. So hineni, here I am. But go ahead.
You have two, you have hineni and hineni spelled two different ways.
No, hine and hineni.
Oh, is the first word there, hine?
Yeah. So it's just there's a suffix at the end of the word hine, and the hey, the second hey is replaced by a nun. It's just the way the Hebrew language.
So the real word is hineni, the long word.
The hineni is the long word.
And that's the real word.
Yeah. It's just the way the Hebrew language, or the hey falls away when you add the suffix.
Thank you.
Hineni. Good. All right, so let's continue. Is there another?
Jillian, you had your hand up earlier.
Go ahead.
Yes, it was pretty much answered. I was struggling to reconcile in my head the difference between staying where you are and thriving versus the command that God gave to Abraham not to stay where you are. And, the people of Babel not to stay in one place.
Sure. So thank you for raising those examples because very often, look, the Hebrews, the Ivrim, as they're called, really the root of that Hebrew word, Ivrim, is to be a wanderer, nomad, to cross over. And that's what the Israelites did when they entered the promised land, is they crossed over and entered the land. When Buber told the original story that I told about Isaac, he was fixed on the place that was home. And so when we look for the treasure, it's the physical home that we go back to. And ultimately, what the Jews wanted was to be settled in a promised land. There's nothing worse than being a people who's driven. So Jeff alluded to it. Some of us know that experience personally, being driven. What we all want to be is a settled people. And once we're settled in a place we can call home for a long time, we have to find our treasures there and become the best versions of ourselves in those places where we are. So when he uses that story at the beginning, it's to acknowledge that sometimes we just keep going, looking, when in fact the treasure is much closer to our home physically, or certainly within ourselves, which is what we're going to get to in the next statement from the book. Yeah, thanks, Barb.
I just, it seems to me that he's alluding to self-esteem, not necessarily, you know, I'm going to be somebody special here, but that you have value wherever you are.
Well, I don't disagree, and I actually thank you for bringing us back to that point, because at the title of his book, The Way of Humanity, he is trying to ground us and to bring us back to our essential selves, and then from there to go perhaps to the other places where we need to be. Look, as I said, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. It was not going to be my essential place. It was not where I was going to find my treasure. I was going to find it in Houston at Beth Israel with all of you. So we do move. We do go to be the best that we can be in places where we can truly thrive. All right, so let's go to number 3 on our page. Here we stand. Here where we stand is the place where we can let the hidden divine light shine. So Buber here is alluding to that verse, that inside of us, the soul of each human being is the light of God. And I've referenced before the term namaste, which means that I bow to the humanity and to the light within you. So the burning light is essentially a divine light. And we can appreciate that that divinity within each of us can lead to something good, which I'm sure Buber is also reflecting here, no pun intended, that when we are born, we're not born with sin. There's no original sin in Judaism. There's no sin that we have to overcome. The only thing we have to do is continue to do mitzvot, which are the good deeds that help us to fashion the covenant that we make with God. All right, number 4 says, everything contains a latent potential for possessing a soul that is dependent upon us humans to actualize its full and pure form. Let's unpack that. I'm just going to find it in the book. It begins by saying every person with whom we may live, with whom we meet from time to time, the animals that we make use of in our agronomy, the very soil that we cultivate, the natural resources that we exploit, the tools that we use, every one of these contains a latent potential for possessing a soul that is dependent upon us humans to actualize its full and pure form. Where does Buber put us in contrast to every other thing in the world? Not quite, not quite. We contain the divine light, and everything in relationship to us depends on how we appreciate the divine light and acknowledge it in everything else. So it could be in the animal, it could be in the soil, it could be in the tool. When we make Havdalah and we light the candle with the multiple wicks, part of what we might say in the Havdalah service is that fire can be used for warming and cooking. It can also be used for destroying and burning down. But how it becomes something useful depends on us. So we contain a very powerful essential strength to find divinity, light, usefulness in all things around us. Does anybody have an example where perhaps you transformed something from something simple to something more sacred and maybe elevated it for a more sacred cause, found its divinity, found its role and high place in our world? I'll give you another example then. When we're at the cemetery and we place earth in the grave, I often explain, because few people remember in that moment, and when we take the shovel, sometimes people take it and they turn it upside down to place the earth in the grave. And what we're really doing is not only demonstrating that it's a very difficult task to bury a loved one, okay, that's the obvious thing, but what we've really done is taken a very simple tool that we use every day and transformed it in that moment into a sacred implement to fulfill a mitzvah, which is considered the greatest mitzvah ever because our loved one can't do the same thing for us when we're laid to rest. So what Huber is suggesting is, I'll read it again for you. It says, every person with whom we may live or whom we meet from time to time, the animals that we make use of in our agronomy, the very soil that we cultivate, the natural resources that we exploit, even the tools that we use, every one of these contains a latent potential for possessing a soul that is dependent upon us humans to actualize its full and pure form. I'm not saying that a shovel has a soul, but if we can take something so simple, a shovel, an animal, the soil, even another human being, and we are the reasons that it is fulfilled and comes to all of its greatest potential, then we see that we're not maybe peers, but we understand what it means to be created in God's image as a human being. We're not animals, we're not simple tools. We have a divine light that deserves to be shared, used for productive reasons.
Okay, going back to the shovel, the analogy that it's a beautiful thing because it does the last right for a human being. It covers them with a blanket of soil. But what is the significance of not handing it to the other person?
Right.
And then what is the significance, I didn't understand, of turning it over? What is it?
Because if we use it as we often do a shovel, what's the difference between putting earth in the grave over a loved one or filling in a hole behind me? If I turn it over, then we call it a shovel because we don't have another name for it. But we're using it in a way that we would only use it to place earth in the grave to bury a loved one.
And it
I would
makes it
certainly not.
harder. It
Makes it harder, but I wouldn't use that shovel to fill in a hole or do anything else. That unique purpose of turning it over is for the unique mitzvah, the greatest mitzvah, to bury a loved one. Now, the reason we put it back in the earth is a very practical thing, because when we do a mitzvah, and it's the greatest mitzvah, we should do it completely ourselves. So when we put it back in the earth pile and step away, each person fulfills it completely for himself or herself. And we don't assist, we don't take away the privilege of doing the full mitzvah.
Thank you. Okay.
That's what it is. All right, so you thought it was just enough to be here, to be present. It's so much more. And our responsibility to fulfill others' ability to be fully present in what they are and what they can do. We're really more connected than we thought. We're not isolated in our treasure. We're not isolated in our divine light at all. It really is something that we have to share. Right, so the next on the backside, number 5, says, if we neglect to establish a genuine relationship with them, then we ourselves miss the true fulfillment of our being. I think that's really a simple statement. I don't have to read more out of the book. If we neglect to establish a genuine relationship with them, an animal, the shovel, another human being, the task at hand, then we ourselves miss the true fulfillment of our being, which suggests that we can only be as full as we can be if we engage, if we acknowledge, if we step in, if we use. That's how it happens. So again, Judaism is so far from the isolated guru who sits on the mountain contemplating his nature. It's just not where it's at. It's not enough. We have a duty to use this divine light to bring something to others. Does anybody have an example that you'd like to share about when you have made a difference in somebody else's life? Even a simple task, it doesn't have to be transforming the nation. Yeah, Diane.
Well, I love animals, and I have had many feral cats in my life, and to see them change through a relationship with me is pretty amazing. Become socialized, trusting instead of a wild animal.
Absolutely. So I'm so glad you mentioned animals, because years ago, I wrote a Temple Bulletin article. It actually, not in the last 20 years, it was when I was the young rabbi here a long time ago. And the title of the article was, "An Animal Speaks with Its Eyes." And the reason I titled that is because Martin Buber said, "An animal speaks with its eyes." He was always looking for that light in all things. And some of you have mentioned to me recently about I, it, and I, thou. We can actually have an I, thou relationship in nature, with a tree, with a dog, with a cat. We can find the divine presence, the divine light in all things. And Buber said, an animal speaks with its eyes. And we had lost a dog at that time. And, many of you have lost a pet. It's heartbreaking. It's really, really hard. And we have a dog now that I absolutely love. His name is Charlie, a Cavalier Charles Spaniel. Oh my gosh. I mean, he cocks his head and his eyes tell me everything I need to know. And by warming up to him, by acknowledging him, even responding to those cues, helps that dog to be happy and loved and all of that. Yeah.
So, Rabbi, as you well know, Lori and I came to Houston about 2.5 years ago, and it was for the purpose of helping our kids out because they both teach, and they needed cheap and efficient childcare. I'm cheap, she's efficient. But it's good because it helps the grandchildren as well, the 3-year-old and the 8-year-old, to feel comfortable with Grandma and Saba on a different level, and to feel comfortable around other adults other than their parents. And it was great joy yesterday. We picked them up from BYDS.
Yeah.
And we were on our way home, and out of nowhere, the kids started to sing Hanukkah songs. And we joined them, and it was quite lovely. So we're making that difference in their lives.
So what Buber would say is what you've just described to all of us. You've evaluated it, you've described it, you've judged it, all of it. It was great. That's I, it. But in the car, singing, and the joy that you turned to each other and expressed with your eyes while you were singing, that's I, thou. And in that car, believe it or not, you found God. Because Buber says that in the I, thou moment, you find the eternal thou. God is always present, and we are sometimes absent. But when you create that I, thou moment, and you got out of the car, you said, oh, that was wonderful. Oh my God, I can't wait to do that again.
Were you listening?
That's what Buber says, is that when we step away from those I, thou moments, even if they're always fated to be I, it, we don't lose anything from ourselves. We grow. And so do those who share that moment. Whether it's a dog or a tree, that shovel actually at the grave helped us to grow and feel something that we needed to in a moment that could have been only sad and only grievous. In fact, there was a mitzvah done there, and we felt connected to something larger than ourselves. So Buber is really helping us to find that within our essential selves, there is power. There is so much we can become and share with others and help them become more of what they are, even while we don't lose anything that we have. Okay, let's continue. See, in number 6, it says, our most powerful dominion over these humble but helpful, distant yet close things or beings will be inherently impotent unless our encounters with them have the aspects of hidden spiritual partnerships. So he writes at the top of the page where this is found, "It is my conviction," he writes, "that the essence of this teaching is true. If day by day we do not give these small encounters their due, that is the water of life that flows into the soul, then the most highly developed aspect of our soul remains arid and fruitless. In the same way, our most powerful dominion over these humble but helpful, distant yet close things or beings will be inherently impotent unless our encounters with them have the aspects of hidden spiritual partnerships." And so everything that we do, and we're fooled really by the world we live in to think that only the grand things make the difference. It's not true. In the simplest moments between people, between things, we can bring power and humanity and light and godliness. And it's really remarkable. And so when he says, if we don't do it, we'll be inherently impotent unless our encounters with him have the aspects of hidden spiritual partnerships. Because what he's really looking for are those aha moments. When you touch an encounter and bring the divine light out of it, that's really the aha moment. Yes.
Well, this one in particular brings to mind something that I did during the pandemic. I live alone, and there was no more alone and loneliness for me during the pandemic, because while I have family here, we were all so scared that we were only safe at our own house, and that's where we stayed. And so in my den, I started looking out. I have big windows, and I found lizards that lived in my yard, and frogs. And I became acquainted with them. The lizards, they have a routine. I have a routine, they have and I began to, I always thought I was a little nuts and crazy, but they gave me joy. And I have 3 frogs that live underneath my concrete, and I only see them in the spring and summer, but they're there. I don't know if they're the same ones or not, but it looks like it. And I have a lizard that I have a gate that locks, and it has a hole in it. And there's a lizard always in there. I don't know if it's the same lizard, but I think it is. And that is a tiny, tiny thing, and I thought I was nuts. But it's not. I needed it then, and I was there for it.
I'm here to tell you that you're not.
So I know that.
And Booba, I think, not would agree. Because I'm sure that when you see the frog or the lizard and you have acknowledged their
Talk
routine,
to it.
you smile.
Yes.
It brings you joy.
I wait for it and talk.
Absolutely. So Boober would say those are moments where we acknowledge the world around us and we have an encounter with it. Those lizards and those frogs wouldn't let you touch or anything, but you had an encounter with it that helped you in the moment you were so deep in that encounter, you didn't even see the room around you. And that encounter, he says, is an I-thou moment. And when you step away from it to describe it to us, it's I-it. But it brought you joy in a time of pandemic that was really mostly fearful and odd and strange. So that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah. And to see something, a divine light or presence in a frog or a lizard, I think that's great. That's beautiful.
I did something different.
Heather?
Yeah, Heather, please.
I got it. Okay. Well, I was just thinking as you're talking about this, that like, it seems like he's kind of saying that we have this, like, we have available to us, like this portal of spirituality within us at all times, and we just have to be aware of it.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. Uber really, he insists that we have to be aware of this constantly. And if we walk sightless among miracles, as we sometimes say, then we miss what is really readily available to us. So it actually, Heather, your comment too is helpful, because let's take a look at number 7. And I'll read from the book and then we'll get to number 7. It's within this paragraph. It says, some religions deny that our sojourn on earth is true life. Hey, you know where I'm going?
Yes.
Because Judaism calls this world the here and now.
Right.
This is it. This is all we've got. This is not a depot to something that we're going. And I'm glad that you know that. It says they teach either that everything we experience is only apparition, that we need to penetrate to perceive what is real, or that life is only a forecourt to the true world, an entryway we must pass through without paying much attention. So that's other faith traditions. We won't call them out, but it's not Judaism. We're not waiting to get to the heavenly sphere where everything is right, and this is some place that we're just guiding our time. He makes very clear, and it's in number 7, Judaism differs, teaching that whatever a person does with sacred intent in the here and now, he uses those words, is no less important and no less true than life in the world to come. This teaching is found, he writes, its strongest expression in Hasidism. What he means is just the joy, the fulfillment of being a Jewish person created in God's image. So I hope that if it's new to you, I hope you appreciate that what he's saying is that this is the world we live in. And this is the world we need to find fulfillment in. Whatever is to come, it should be just as good, it should be even better, and we can believe lots of things. But Judaism doesn't depend on the heavenly realm or olam haba, the world to come. We can say there's no sickness there, there's no war there, but we don't know. And I've said to you countless times, until somebody comes back to tell us, we don't know. What we do know and what we can observe in front of us is what God has given us, the humanity, the divine light. And so in the here and now, we find fulfillment.
Yes.
I think I saw a hand. Okay, yeah, sure.
I may be a little controversial, but how come this is Hasid in its purest form? Why do Hasids try to live in the last 2 centuries ago with the Yiddish, with the, I mean, there was an article about the architecture. Everywhere there's a Chabad, it is an exact imitation.
So we're using the word a little differently than Buber intended, because in the time of the Baal Shem Tov and the rise of Hasidism, what it really was, there was a movement in Judaism that was strict about laws and rules and rituals. And what the Hasids did differently than what we see today, what the Hasids said was that the fulfillment of Judaism wasn't found in stricture, it was found in the joy of Judaism. So Buber related to Hasidism because Buber found joy and life and light in Judaism by living and seeing, relating, experiencing, as we've been talking about, rather than just rubbing your nose on the page of Talmud and living by strict halachic rules. Not that Buber was a Reformed Jew, but he took the teachings of Judaism and said these weren't for just to study, dense texts in a book, but rather to bring us into the here and now and to live life fully. What you see today, what we call Hasids today, is an aberration of what Buber and the original Hasids did. In fact, with the birth of Hasidism, there arose another movement called the Mitnagdim. The Mitnagdim really, the root of that word means to stand against, because they didn't believe that Judaism should be, the meaning of it should be found in the joy and fulfillment of all that, but rather in the strict life of the Jew. So today what you find in the ultra-Orthodox is not necessarily the Hasidism of Buber or even the original Hasids, but rather the very strict observance. But you see photos or statues, when you see the typical Hasid, what's the Hasid's posture in paintings and statues? What are they doing very often?
Praying.
Singing. They're dancing. Actually, in the bride's room, there's an old sculpture. Nobody wants it. There's dancing, a horror, because that's celebration, and that's Judaism. Really, Judaism isn't really grievous and gray and dark. It's filled with light and hope and happiness. Very good. So let's continue with number 8. It says, in their innermost truth, 2 worlds are one. It only appears as if they're separated, but they will become the oneness again, which in their innermost truth they are. And, he says, humankind is created for the purpose of unifying the two worlds. All humans contribute to this unification through their sacred living with the world in which they have been put in the place where they stand. So what he's alluding to, and I love this, is that this world in heaven, Olam Haba, there are foretastes or measures of it already discovered and experienced in this world. So in the Talmud, there's an expression that says, where heaven and earth touch. Okay? And they're using those words loosely. They don't really know what heaven is. They can only imagine what it is. But we do know what the earth is. It's here and now where we need to do things. And where is it that heaven and earth touch? Where we do a mitzvah. Where we do a mitzvah. Because when we do a mitzvah, we're actually responding to God's commandment. So for example, when we say, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, the words that preceded are vitzivanu, that God commanded us to eat, bring forth bread from the earth. And after we recite it, we do it, we eat the bread. Borei priagafen, we say the blessing that God commanded us, God created the fruit of the vine, we drink the wine. So wherever we do a mitzvah in response to feeling called or commanded is a place, the Talmud says, where heaven and earth touch. So what Buber is saying is that we live in this world of here and now, but we're not so separated from all that we still might long for or others speak of. Actually, in our humanity, in our world, we unify the two worlds by being the very best that we can be. And the tools that we have been given are mitzvot. 613 in the Torah and many more outside of it. Yeah.
How do we know we've done enough? Or that we're doing enough? I
Um,
mean, he seems to be saying, oh, well, of course you're doing it.
Yeah.
But do you ever feel that you're doing this?
Well, I'll start with this, that we're taught about mitzvot, that we don't do the mitzvah for the sake of the reward. We do it for the sake of the mitzvah. If you've done the mitzvah, you don't need to be applauded and you don't need ribbons. So think about our children and our grandchildren. How many of them need a ribbon and a trophy just for showing up to the game, right? And I've been to my grandkids' soccer games where they don't keep score because everybody's a winner until they grow up and realize not everybody might not be either. So the mitzvah, we do the mitzvah, and I think part of our self-actualization is to appreciate that the mitzvah has been done. And we have to be sure to tell ourselves it's done. Now, if you want to know where the outer boundary is, Maimonides in the 12th century also taught that we can't give so much away so as to impoverish ourselves. Okay? So Maimonides really taught us how to appreciate the word reasonableness. What is reasonable? You still have to go home and have food for yourself. You can't say, I gave so much away that suffering is a virtue. I have nothing to eat, and what a mitzvah I did. No, you're wrong. Suffering is not a virtue. We can learn from it. We can learn from poverty too, but we don't aim for it, okay? Not like others. We're not an ascetic tradition. The only time we're really ascetic is on Yom Kippur when we don't eat and we deprive ourselves of things. But we are not, if you've been in a Jewish home at the dining room table, there's no asceticism there. And I had breakfast, I had a breakfast meeting at Kenny and Ziggy's this morning. There you go. Not that I couldn't possibly eat everything they put on the table.
Oh, my goodness.
Other questions? Okay, let's move along. So when we get to number 9, I think that what Buber is doing is he's wrapping up this chapter, while he's also introduced and invited us to see where we are, where we stand, and what we can make of our life and the relationships that we have in those places where we stand. How do we let God in? How does it all begin? And this is not just basic Judaism, but it is so at the heart of our Judaism. So in number 9, I'll read from the book. It says, God wishes to come to the world, but wishes to do so through humans. The mystery of our existence is that humankind does have the superhuman potential. Buber was a spiritual man. So the divine light within us, we have to appreciate, is God-given. And God, I don't want to say God works through us, but God has given us everything we need to do sacred work, to do a mitzvah. okay? And he says, Rabbi Mendel of Kotz surprised several of the learned men who were his guests with the question, where is God's dwelling? Where does God dwell? He asked his guests, and they replied with laughter. What are you saying? Is not the entire world filled with God's glory? Citing Isaiah chapter 6, verse 3, we say, the earth is full of God's glory. So that's where God is. Fills the world. The world cannot contain God, but God contains the entire world. But he answered his own question. Where does God dwell? God dwells wherever one lets God in. Okay? So part of the responsibility to find where God dwells depends on us. If your heart's closed, if your mind is closed, you'll search everywhere you need, except right where you are. If you open your heart, you open your head, there you go. There's God. Stop running, stop climbing, stop searching. It's right here. Yeah.
So if I go back to Hineni, it doesn't mean a place.
Yeah.
It means where you are.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you go to Chicago or Houston.
Yeah.
That's not what here means.
Right.
It's more the other translation is
absolutely. And when you travel the world, you are still where you are. That your hine or hineni goes with you. You have to be your essential self wherever you are. And as you said on the screen, I can't see you from this distance. When God called Abraham to go forth and the people went, they were bringing who they were at the time. But as we know, even Abraham grew. Moses came down the mountain with an aura around him. All of us are called, so to speak, if we hear what's called the still small voice within us, if we listen to it and appreciate what it calls us to do or to go and to be, we see that we continue to grow. But we start with our essential light.
I was just going to say, wherever you go, you take you with you.
Yeah, don't leave yourself behind. Be sure to pack yourself.
Wait
So
yourself.
finally, he writes in the last paragraph of this chapter, ultimately, everything depends on this, letting God in. The reason that he says letting God in is because if we don't let God in, the rest of it can't happen. It has to start with appreciating that we have a divine light and a divine purpose. But one can only let God in where one stands, where one truly stands, he writes, where one lives a true life. As long as we cultivate sacred intercourse with that little world that has been entrusted to us, as long as we help the sacred substance of the soul belonging to the domain of creation in which we live to actualize its perfection, then we establish a dwelling for God in this, our place. Then we let God in. So let's take it on the page. I think what I tried to do was to extract from that paragraph what was essential. Ultimately, everything depends on this, letting God in. You got that? Where one stands, where one lives a true life. What do you think is a true life? How would you define a true life?
I think in earlier chapters, he teaches us to be who we are and to stop looking at other people and comparing. So a true life is to give up that sense of competitiveness and even demeaning ourselves in relation to others. But to be who we are, you can only live a true life if you're true to yourself.
Good. And what he wants us never to forget is that the standard by which we measure whether we're on a path of humanity, on a path to God, is by measuring it against our Torah and mitzvah. If somebody says to you that's the wrong thing to do, but you can open a book and say, but the mitzvah says it's this way, then I would stand with you. Because that's our standard. That's the measure we use to be sure that we're living a true life. And then it says where one lives a true life, as long as we cultivate sacred intercourse with that little world that has been entrusted to us. And I want to stop. The sacred intercourse is the encounter. And if we acknowledge it as encounter, as you did, Diane, with dogs, or with the lizards and the frogs, or with my dog, and certainly with people, if that is sacred intercourse, then we're standing in the right place, and we've done with it what has been entrusted to us to do. Then we establish a dwelling for God in this, our place. Then we let God in. So you can applaud yourself. You can feel that you've accomplished what you were meant to do if in that place where you live, in the still small place where you exist, whether it's here or along the road, if you've created sacred encounter and let God in that place, then you can feel warm in your heart that you've accomplished what you needed. Yeah.
I've always thought of Maimonides' comment about not giving too much of yourself to be also about like emotional turmoil and beating yourself up and that agonizing over choices.
Absolutely.
To not just like physically don't deprive yourself, but don't make yourself miserable by antagonizing over that decision.
Right.
So I think to come back to like, when do you know, have you done enough, is relieve yourself of that burden of like, do I need to check that off the list, or in the moment can I be present to I started the journey and therefore
right. If you know you've done the mitzvah to provide shalom bayit, to create a peaceful house, then you're done. And if people choose to be unhappy, go and live and be well. I can't help you. It's not my responsibility to make you happy if you choose to be miserable. If you want to do the wrong thing, I can show you the right way. I can show you how to do it and why it's meaningful, like this class on Here Where One Stands suggests. But if you choose to go the other way, I can't help you. And it's not our job to save everybody. Okay? Judaism, first of all, we're not afraid of hell anyway. So I'm not interested in saving you, right? It has no bearing on me. So I'm not interested in saving you. And we don't have to be saved. But we have to be, as Leviticus said, as I cited earlier, shall we continually be seeking holiness. That is not to be religious righteous, but holy means to be set apart for a special purpose. And I think what Buber wants us to know is not only have we been created in God's image for a special purpose, but we've been given a Torah, a way of humanity that we ultimately discover is sacred and set apart for a special purpose. So as I began, today, I wanted you to know that essentially you are wonderful. And I need you to look in the mirror every day and say, I'm not so bad. I'm wonderful because God created me to be the best that I can be. Okay, but if you have a Jewish mother, then you're already one.
Rabbi, the entire presentation over the 3 sessions have been focused on mitzvot, on letting God in, where is God? How would you posit a humanist Jew could relate to what Buber is saying, if possible?
Well, so a humanist Jew doesn't believe that God exists. They don't, I don't know how they read the Torah. I don't know how they recite a blessing. I don't really get it. But even those who are not humanists still struggle with what is God? Where is God? How do I believe? And you don't have to have faith to be Jewish. The whole word Israel means to wrestle with God and prevail. So faith isn't constant, it rises and falls. But what we do know, and I would say to a humanist, maybe what we would call an agnostic, is that we've been given a set of teachings, not rules. Some are called rules and laws, but a mitzvah is a commandment. Torah means teaching. Torah doesn't mean law, Torah means a teaching. So and to quote Rabbi Carr for blessed memory, he said that when we engage with mitzvah, we should ask ourselves, what does this mitzvah mean to me in this time and this place? So that we're not living as the Chassids did hundreds of years ago. We're living in this time and this place. So what I added to Rabbi Carr's comments is that we'll take the example of keeping Shabbat. The question we ask ourselves cannot be, will I keep Shabbat? Because the answer could be no. And it's very often no. But the question should be, how will I respond to this mitzvah to keep the Sabbath? Then there's an answer. It might be the best answer ever, or it might be a small beginning where we let God in, even related to other matters. Take, an ethical mitzvah. Should I love my neighbor as myself? Should I worry about someone else's happiness? How will I? Not will I. How will I? And also preserve myself in the process. So I think the question how, related to many mitzvot, gives us a tool to use as we unpack our way of humanity. And I would say it doesn't depend on, God's already participated. We've received the Torah. Actually, we don't talk about God at all. If we feel that God is in our heart and our soul, or something has motivated us to do the mitzvah, then we're on our way. And remember, the rabbis also taught that the understanding comes through the doing. So do it. In Hebrew school, when the teachers taught you the prayers and they said, just memorize it, just read it. Through the doing came the understanding. And getting the mitzvah done was much more important than understanding why we had to do it. Thankfully, with teachers like David Scott, who's leading our MBJLC and lifelong learning, we want to know, we want the understanding before we do it. That's sensible. But we can't delay. We can't wait until we know it all before we get on with it. And at least Buber helps us to know that when we get on with it, there can be joy and light, and we can grow from the experience. Yeah.
Rabbi, I want to say thank you for, I was at 2 of your 3, but please pass it on to our teens.
Yeah.
And let them know that they're valued and that they are a spark of light, and God walks with them and through them, and they are us.
Absolutely.
Because we are older and we get it now, but they need it more than we do. Well, both ways.
It's very generous of you, very generous of you. And I will tell you that even though you're older than teenagers, sometimes it's really gratifying and validating to learn it even now, that what you've done or what you tried to do was not for naught, and that it's been very meaningful. And if others didn't appreciate it or didn't know what you were aiming to do, it's on them. And granted, we could all have done something better than we did, but we're not losers, and we didn't fail in what we attempted to do. We were our essential selves. Sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's not. But as long as we're living and breathing, we still have time to do it better. Thank you, everybody.